ANC KwaZulu-Natal Secretary Bheki Mtolo said the position of the Prime Minister to the Zulu Nation is not recognized by the Constitution. Mtolo said this during a briefing set up by the ANC in the province to pronounce its position following the incident that took place this past Saturday, where chairperson Siboniso Duma grabbed the microphone while the Prime Minister to the Zulu Nation Thulasizwe Buthelezi was delivering his speech. Mtolo further explained that Duma displayed an act of heroism by saving the day. The party says it has resolved to go to the Royal House on Monday to apologize. So what can we make of this incident? We speak to Advocate Ntsewa, who's joining us now in studio to weigh in on this. Advocate, good morning and thank you so much for making time for us.
Good morning.
We're actually running a poll this morning where we're asking our viewers to reflect on what has taken place over the weekend and also what their take is on the assertion that has been made by Bheki Mtolo that legally, according to the Constitution, the position of the Zulu Prime Minister is not recognized. I'd love to hear your take on this because factually he is correct. It's not in the Constitution. However, though, the position of Zulu Prime Minister is recognized by the Zulu Nation itself, including the King.
Well, that is the case. It is not in the Constitution. It is not. In fact, when you look at the act that establishes traditional leadership, there is no provision for a position of a Prime Minister. But as you're saying, yes, truly, the people, the Zulu people, do recognize that such a position exists, and it has been in existence for some time. I've read somewhere that I think it was by one of the family members, I think it was a Mtolo, who indicated that Buthelezi family, as part of the children of the sisters of King Dinizulu, I think, somewhere there, sort of accidentally inherited the Prime Minister's position among all the other children of the sisters of the King then. But given the time that has lapsed, I think it's now accepted that the Zulu Prime Minister exists and perhaps it may need formalization, I do not know. But it is now accepted.
Yeah, because actually Siboniso Duma, speaking to our colleague Kolim Gambi, did say that there was a push for the recognition of the Zulu Prime Minister through legislation. However, though, the ANC pushed back against that. However, what played out over the weekend, because in one part you have Bheki Mtolo, who's arguing that the Zulu Prime Minister wasn't on the program, and the argument from the Zulu Prime Minister's side was that his role is to introduce the King. But what played out and what you read into that?
What you see in that area is that it's a manifestation of a continuing struggle between traditional leadership as a whole, and in KwaZulu-Natal in particular, against the movement to transform society. You recall that before apartheid, all chiefs, all traditional leaders were members of the legislatures of homelands, legislatures there. And since 1994, that has been taken away. And you now have those families, the royal families throughout the country, having a grudge against democracy for being excluded from the privileges that they enjoyed pre-1994. And therefore, that struggle, which in KwaZulu-Natal is represented by the IFP, continues. That's a struggle by families that now feel that were part of the network of apartheid, because you recall that in order to get an ID or a passbook before 1994, you had to go through a traditional office, royal family house, and then go to the government office. But all those things have now been integrated into the democratic system. So those families, the royal families, are aggrieved by that, and therefore are trying to push back the democratic advances, the progress that has been made by, since 1994. And you would know that people in the rural areas, even to this day, remain tenants in their own land, and they pay levies every month, which levies go to royal families, traditional offices and all that. And in KwaZulu-Natal, you know, there's an Inkonyama Trust that collects levies from the people. Now, as the democratic movement removes all those oppressive systems, then there's bound to be a struggle. And I think that Chief Buthelezi, the Prime Minister of the Zulu, represents, and the IFP as a whole, represents that resistance against progress. And that is why you would have such an outburst, even on occasions.
Why do you call it resistance against progress?
Because traditional leaders would still want to have those benefits that they had prior to 1994. So, once you have something that is now gradually being taken away or has been taken away, then there's bound to be a grievance.
If we look at the Traditional and Khoisan Leadership Act, which has now been declared unconstitutional by the Constitutional Court, is that there was actually a push to give or to reinstate some of the powers that there were before 1994.
And indeed, I heard the President during one of his campaign trails saying that they want to give back the powers that traditional leaders had. And that is unconstitutional because Constitution defines government in three spheres. It's national, provincial, and local. There's no fourth sphere called traditional leadership. And
even though the Constitution recognizes traditional leadership?
The Constitution recognizes traditional leadership as a cultural and religious and linguistic structure, not as an object of governance. Now, once you bring traditional leadership into government, you want them to administer land, you want them to provide water, then you are invading into the space of local government, into the space of municipalities, and that becomes unconstitutional because there are only three spheres and nothing more. Unfortunately, rural people remain to this day subjected to a fourth sphere that has, crept into the system. They are imposing curfews on communities. They are imposing levies on communities and all that. Unfortunately, in Limpopo, I think in November, there was a judgment by Deputy Judge President Semenya, which says that all collection of levies from communities by traditional leaders must stop. And there was an order that government, particularly the provincial governments and municipalities, must publish that judgment as wide as possible. Unfortunately, that has not been done. I do not know why that has not been done. But as you would know, sometimes you would find that there is a closer relationship between traditional leaders and some provincial government leadership, and that's why I think that judgment was not widely publicized as it was supposed to be.
And going back again to that incident that happened over the weekend, what you see also here is almost the power struggle between a governing party, which is the ANC, and then you have the Prime Minister, who is a member of the IFP, senior member of the IFP, and also a mayor in one of the municipalities in KwaZulu-Natal. The question then becomes, when it comes to the question around protocol, whose power reigns supreme in a constitutional democracy?
The Constitution comes first. The Constitution in its preamble says the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. All of us, everyone, all of us are subject to that Constitution. And as I said, that traditional leadership is itself supposed to be a cultural and linguistic and religious object, but unfortunately, they are struggling or they are resisting the new Constitution as it is and want to remain an object of governance. That is why there is that power struggle. So I think that it was correct for Mr. Duma to take away the microphone as the Chief Buthelezi was now venturing into his IFP position, using the Prime Minister's position as a sort of leeway to advocate for the IFP position.
What about the argument that it is the Zulu Prime Minister, he is representing the King, and therefore he has a role to play in introducing the King, but as you point out as well, that then politics came in?
Yes. That is the problem. Well, the Prime Minister's position, someone introducing the king is not a problem. But remember that the king is also subject to the Constitution. So the king cannot come in and portray himself as being above the Constitution, as being... I know that, as Mr. Duma was saying, in Zulamiti, the one who's presiding over all, but the fact remains that even the king is subject to the Constitution. Chapter 12 of the Constitution recognizes him as such, and that cultural laws, traditional laws, and customary law are all subsumed into the Constitution. So no customary law can be projected above the Constitution.
Do you think that at all this is also complicated by the decision of the provincial government in KwaZulu-Natal, for instance, that when you have major events that are taking place, like for instance the opening of the provincial legislature, it is the king who opens the legislature?
You see, in 1995 or so, the IFP, as the governing body or party, passed the legislation or created a constitution for themselves in KwaZulu-Natal, where they then put, or they call themselves ministers, and put the king as sort of the head of state or head of the province, which doesn't find space and place in the general constitution that we have. And I think what then happened was that when the ANC took over through Premier Ndebele at the time, they continued with those practices, unfortunately. And I think that...
What makes it unfortunate?
Because that problem is coming back now to bite them, and it's affecting the entire country, because it gives other traditional leaders elsewhere the thinking that they are supposed to be the monarchies, because the monarchies in their own provinces.
Because they even get a budget.
They do get a budget that is in KwaZulu-Natal, a very huge budget, unfortunately, against the poverty-stricken people of KwaZulu. I mean, you now have the Premier announcing that they will be building palaces for the new king. And obviously, that is raising other issues in other provinces. That why there? Why not us in Limpopo or elsewhere? But I think it's unfortunate, given the fact that the role of traditional leadership is not governance. It's cultural and linguistic. It must remain there. But once you want to project it into government and want the chiefs to be part of government, that's where you get it wrong. And I think that's the problem we have now.
Thank you so much for your time. That is Advocate Ntsewa. Reflecting on what happened over the weekend and also following the press briefing from the ANC, saying that, well, they stand by what Siboniso Duma did. However, though, they will still go and apologize to the king. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that.